Imagine this, you wake up in the pitch black of night, miles from anyone, and you're moving, you're being carried away, trapped inside your own sleeping bag, completely powerless and at the mercy of something that isn't quite human. This is the unbelievable story of Albert Ostman. In 1924, a tough-as-nails prospector walked into the Canadian wilderness searching for a lost gold mine. He came back with a story so wild he kept it secret for over 30 years. Why? He was afraid no one would ever believe he'd been kidnapped by a Sasquatch. But what if he wasn't lying? Albert Ostman wasn't some guy who made things up. He was a seasoned outdoorsman, a Swedish immigrant who'd spent years in rugged logging and construction camps. By his own admission, he didn't believe in the Indian fables about mountain giants, but a string of bizarre events at his campsite would kick off a terrifying 6-day ordeal that would change his life forever. The year was 1924. For a lot of men, the vast, untamed wilderness of British Columbia was a place to find fortune and solitude. Albert Ostman was one of them. He'd come over from Sweden and was no stranger to hard work. He decided he needed a vacation, a working vacation, and set his sights on the remote Toba Inlet, a deep fjord cutting into the coast mountains. Toba Inlet was, and still is, incredibly isolated. You can only get there by water or air. It's a land of stunning beauty, but also a place of deep-seated legends. Ostman was chasing rumours of a lost gold mine, a classic frontier story about a prospector who would vanish and come back with a bag full of gold until one day he didn't come back at all. To get there, Ostman hired an elderly indigenous man to boat him to the head of the inlet. The journey itself felt like a warning. The guide told Ostman stories about the area, including what some people thought happened to the last gold seeker. Some folks, the guide said, believed a Sasquatch had gotten him. Ostman was skeptical. He'd never even heard the word Sasquatch before and asked what it meant. The man described them as big, hairy people who lived in the mountains, not animals but a different kind of human. He mentioned his uncle seeing tracks 2 feet long and an elder spotting one over 8 feet tall. Ostman brushed it all off as folklore. That might have been thousands of years ago, he thought, but not today. The guide just said, there may not be many, but they still exist. After getting dropped off, Ostman told the guide to come back for him in about 3 weeks. As the boat disappeared down the inlet, he was truly alone. He spent the next few days prospecting, searching for the lost mine. The guide's warnings probably a distant echo in his mind, but as the days turned to night, those echoes were about to get a whole lot louder. For the first few days, everything was normal. Ostman was an experienced woodsman and knew the sounds of the forest. But then, things started to feel off. The feeling that he was the only person for miles around began to disappear. It started small. One morning he woke up to find his camp disturbed. Someone had gone through his pack sack. A few things were missing, nothing valuable, just half a pound of prunes and some pancake flour. His first thought? A porcupine. Annoyed, he secured his camp better that night, thinking he could outsmart some animal. The next morning, it happened again. More food gone. But this time, his matches had been moved, as if someone had inspected them. This was no porcupine, and a bear would have torn the whole camp to shreds. This was different, methodical. A cold knot of fear started to twist in his gut. He was being watched. That night, Ostman sat up with his rifle, determined to catch the thief. But after days of prospecting and nights of growing anxiety, exhaustion won. He crawled into his sleeping bag, gear within arm's reach, and drifted into an uneasy sleep. He was a heavy sleeper, but something woke him in the dead of night. Not a sound, but a feeling. He was moving. He was being carried. Before he could even process it, the reality hit him like a ton of bricks. He was inside his sleeping bag, slung over the shoulder of something immensely powerful, like a sack of potatoes. Panic set in. He was being abducted. He couldn't see, could barely breathe, and could feel the powerful, rhythmic strides of his captor as it climbed steadily uphill. The journey was rough. He was jostled and bumped around. wondering if his bones would break. All he could smell was a strong, wild odour of sweat, earth and fur. For what he guessed was 3 hours, the terrifying journey went on. 3 hours of being carried through the dark, a prisoner in his own bedding. His mind raced with one terrifying question, planted there by his guide's warning. What in God's name was this thing the man called Sasquatch? The journey finally ended. Ostman felt himself being set down, and his pack was dropped beside him with a clatter of tin cans. Then he heard voices. A strange guttural chatter that was clearly a language, but one he'd never heard before. His captor let go of the sleeping bag and he rolled down a short slope. Frantically he wriggled his head out for a gasp of air, his legs numb and useless. As he lay there, terrified, he realised he was surrounded. He could hear at least 4 of them. As dawn broke, he saw where he was, a small, bowl-shaped valley, like a natural fortress, with only one way in or out, and then he saw them. His captors. It was a family. There was the one he'd call the Old Man. He was huge, a towering figure Ostman estimated at nearly 8 feet tall, with a massive chest and shoulders covered in dark brown hair. His head peaked at the top, slanting up from a narrow forehead, a feature now known as a sagittal crest, common in male apes. This was the patriarch, the one who carried him here. There was also an old lady, smaller, with wider hips and breasts. She looked unhappy, as if she didn't approve of her husband dragging a human home. And there were 2 younger ones, a boy and a girl. Ostman guessed the young fellow was like a teenager, maybe 7 feet tall. The girl was smaller and shy. They all stared at him with a mix of fear and curiosity. This was his new reality, a prisoner of a family of legendary creatures. For 6 days, Albert Ostman lived among them. His terror slowly shifted to cautious observation. They weren't going to hurt him, but they also weren't letting him leave. Every time he edged toward the valley's exit, the old man would grunt and take a step toward him, a clear warning. He watched their daily routine. The female seemed to handle the chores, gathering piles of ferns and moss. Their diet seemed to be vegetarian. They dug for roots and ate tender shoots. They even offered him a sweet-tasting grass, which he ate to save his own supplies. The young ones were playful, often wrestling and chasing each other. The boy, especially, was fascinated by Ostman, creeping closer to get a better look. Their language was a constant stream of whoops, whistles, and guttural sounds. The thought of using his rifle definitely crossed his mind. He had bullets. Maybe he could shoot the old man and run for it, but he decided against it. They hadn't hurt him. What if he only wounded the giant? What if he killed it and the others attacked him? He was 1 man against 4 in their territory. It was a risk he wasn't willing to take. So he waited, watched, and desperately tried to think of a way out. He was a castaway on an island of giants, and his only hope was to outsmart them. After nearly a week, Ostman's food was almost gone, and so was his hope. He knew he needed to create a major distraction to escape the old man's constant watch. An idea sparked, centered on a small box in his pack. His snuff, a finely ground tobacco. He'd noticed the old man's intense curiosity. The creature mimicked his actions. So Ostman hatched a plan. He started making a big show of taking a pinch of snuff, acting like it was the best thing he'd ever tasted. He made sure the old man was watching. Finally, the moment came. The old man grunted and gestured toward the box. He wanted some. Ostman's heart pounded as he held it out. He hoped the creature would just take a pinch, but the Sasquatch grabbed the entire box and dumped the whole thing into his mouth. The effect was instant and violent. The potent tobacco hit the creature's system hard. His eyes rolled back in his head, and he let out a squeal like a stuck pig. He grabbed Ostman's cold coffee can and chugged it, grounds and all, but it didn't help. The giant doubled over and staggered toward a spring for water. This was it. It was now or never. As the family fell into chaos, Ostman lunged for his gear. He frantically stuffed his sleeping bag and supplies into his pack. The old lady saw him and started to move toward him. Not wanting to hurt her, he raised his rifle and fired a shot over her head. The deafening crack echoed through the valley. The female, terrified, ran for cover. Ostman didn't look back. He bolted through the narrow pass and ran for his life, crashing through the dense forest, adrenaline pumping through him. He ran for hours until he stumbled upon a logging operation, a sign he was back in the world of men. He was exhausted and shaken to his core, but he didn't tell the loggers what really happened. He just said he was a prospector who got lost. They bought it. For more than 30 years, Albert Ostman told no one the full story. He tried a few times in logging camps but was met with laughter and accused of being drunk or crazy, so he buried the story deep inside. A 6-day nightmare he had to live with alone. He'd survived the abduction, but now he was in a new prison, one of silence. For 33 years, Albert Ostman's incredible story stayed a secret. It wasn't until 1957, when Bigfoot stories started hitting the mainstream, that he felt the world might finally be ready to listen. He came forward not for fame or money, but to finally get the story off his chest. He gave his account to a newspaper, and most importantly, swore to its truth in a legal affidavit. On August 20th, 1957, a police magistrate named A.M. Naismith officially took his statement. Naismith noted he found Ostman to be of sound mind and questioned him intensely. He wrote, "I cross-examined him and used every means to endeavour to find a flaw in either his personality or his story, but could find neither. Ostman stuck to every detail of his account until his death in 1975. So, is the story true? Skeptics have plenty of reasons to doubt it. The most obvious issue is the 33-year gap before he told anyone. Couldn't he have imagined it all? Others point to the complete lack of physical evidence, no hair, no photos, and the escape using a box of snuff sounds more like a tall tale than a real event. Primatologist John Napier even questioned the story, arguing there wouldn't have been enough food in a valley like that to support a family of giant primates. But those who believe him have strong counter-arguments. His silence makes perfect sense. In 1924, there was no popular idea of Bigfoot, and telling a story like that would have gotten him labelled as crazy. The fact that he never wanted money for his story and even gave a sworn statement lends him a lot of credibility. Plus, many details in his story are surprisingly consistent with thousands of other eyewitness reports that have come out since. His description of a tall, hairy primate with a peaked head wasn't common knowledge then, but it perfectly matches what we might expect from an unknown primate. His account of their language, a complex mix of whoops and whistles, and their family structure also fits with modern theories about great apes. So what are we to believe? Was Albert Ostman a brilliant liar who made up an elaborate hoax for no reason? Was he a man who had a mental break in the wilderness, or was he telling the absolute truth? An ordinary man who had an extraordinary encounter with a species unknown to science, still hiding in the deepest corners of North America. His story is a cornerstone of Bigfoot lore, a detailed account that continues to fascinate and baffle researchers. It's been debated for over 60 years, but we're no closer to a final answer. The legend of Albert Ostman survives because it taps into the deep mystery of our world's wild places and the unsettling idea that we might not be the only intelligent beings walking this earth. What do you think? Was Albert Ostman telling the truth? What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Let us know your theories in the comments. And if you enjoyed this investigation, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the world's greatest unsolved mysteries.